Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to quickly check out the Paladin for Heroes of Hammerwatch 2. So, like my other guide videos, I have to stress, this is not one of those, you gotta play this way, this is the meta, you gotta, this is how you win, kind of videos. No, I'm not here to do that. I'm well aware that there are metas out there, and I'm one of those people that I prefer to play my own way because I want to have fun playing the game. I don't want to be one of those people that are just following everyone else. I'd rather play the game the way I want to, even if it's not the most efficient way to do it. I'm going to show you what I'm doing with my Paladin, introduce you to the class itself, show you what it's capable of, and then I'll let you make your own decisions. When it comes to weapons, you've got a wide variety of them. And while you could choose a ranged weapon, while you could maybe increase your intelligence, which you may end up doing anyway because you're going for some kind of crit build, you could equip like a wand or a staff. Like, you could do that, but keep in mind the Paladin does have some melee tag skills that require the use of a melee weapon in order to work. So what that means is you're more than likely going to use a combination of a shield and a one-handed weapon. The shield is there for defense. It helps to block projectiles. That's great. It makes the Paladin even more tanky. Although it is very possible for you to run a two-handed axe or a sledgehammer, something like that, if that's how you want to go. I'm not going to tell you how to play, but my current setup is just a shield, whatever strongest shield I could come up with, as well as a mace. And I will switch off between a mace and an axe. The mace will give you that 15% chance to inflict stun, whereas typically the axe is all about the whole possible bleed thing. But ideally, you're going to have a choice, and you're going to want to go melee for the skill-related stuff. And again, I would recommend a one-handed weapon and an offhand shield. But you do you. Attributes. Now, this one's going to get a little messy, because out of all of the classes, the Paladin is the one where you can spread your points the most, because it's capable of doing different things. It's one of, well, I think the only class that has an active heal ability right from the get-go. The Ranger has those healing wisps with the right specialization, the Warden, but the Paladin has a heal that can actually help other people, so it can be used as a support class. It can also be a damage dealer. It can also be a tank. It's one of those jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none kind of classes, and we've seen those before in games like World of Warcraft, where, you know, the warrior tank was always better than the paladin tank, or the druid healer or the priest healer is always better than the paladin healer, just because the paladin spreads itself a little thin. That's what I feel the Paladin is all about here. And as such, you can kind of throw your attribute points any way you want to go with it, right? Now, until they fix the whole weapon damage being less effective than spell power or spell damage thing, like, I think they're working on that. However, until they do, spell power is going to be the driving force here. But here's where it gets a little sticky. Strength will give you spell power and armor. But with the whole NG scaling right now, the higher you NG run, the more armor penalty you get. And the amount of points you throw into strength typically just aren't enough to offset those NG penalties. So that's kind of, some people see it as a waste, and I can totally relate to that. I can understand that. It's just not enough to offset those NG penalties. What you're left with is spell power, which is just consistent damage with your skills. That's okay. I still put my points into strength because I've never respect ever since I leveled this guy up from 1. But at some point I may want to. It all depends on how I'm feeling. But I still think strength is your primary recommended attribute. And then when you want to start like min-maxing your damage, you may want to look into intelligence, because at the moment, I have to stress this, the developers are patching things, I'm sure, at some point. Intelligence and crit actually scales better than consistent spell power damage right now. So some people are favoring, with melee classes anyway, they're doing the whole crit thing with intelligence as opposed to, say, strength or dexterity, whatever. So just keep that in mind. You can take the Paladin a couple of different ways. You could take it the recommended strength route. along with some vitality to keep it buff. Or you can go with the intelligence route, maybe throw in some focus in there so that you're doing more crit damage as opposed to regular spell power damage. Or you can do a mix and match of all of these different things. It's up to you. Dexterity is weapon crit and weapon crit chance. Again, until they fix or address that, I don't think dexterity is going to be as important. So honestly, you have a choice. Strength, intelligence, focus, vitality. It depends on what kind of build you want to go for. Do you want a more consistent, even if it's not the most powerful build out there, with some armor, then maybe strength and vitality with a little bit of focus. Or if you want to try that whole crit thing, go with intelligence of vitality with some focus as well, so that you're not running out of mana. So it's up to you on how you want to approach that. I again prefer the consistent spell power damage, even if it's not the strongest thing to choose. But again, I'll leave that up to you to decide on how to handle that. Everything from here on out is going to be one of those it depends on what you're running kind of things, because like I said, the Paladin is diverse in what it can do and how you can build it. So if you're going for a strength build, for example, you may want to consider the whole powerful tag, which is going to give you spell power. If you've got, let's take a look at this head slot here. There we go. So you could choose powerful, which again is the whole spell power thing. If you're going for the strength build, then you could also choose brawny, which again, strength affects both armor and spell power. But again, armor isn't really that effective at higher NGs, so, maybe choose powerful instead, which gives you more, because this is only 23 strength, so it's kind of splitting it up. And then stout is for health. So if you're going to go with a strength build, I recommend a combination of powerful and stout. If you want to increase your armor too, some brawny for the strength instead. You'll just get less spell power out of it. If you're going with strength, that's what I would recommend. However, if you're going for more intellect, if you're going for that spell crit, then you may want to consider keen instead of brawny or powerful. Keen will affect intelligence, and intelligence in turn affects spell crit chance, and the damage. There is that whole deadly tag, which is just spell crit damage. You could look into specific spell crit stuff, but again, keen is the intelligence one that'll just spread that love across all of your spell crit stuff. So if you're going intelligence, maybe keen and stout, or a combination thereof. And again, your blues are going to be different. I would recommend anything that reduces Shadow Curse, simply because the Paladin is a melee, through and through. So yeah, he does have a couple of ranged attacks, but it's still like close range. So you're open to getting hit a lot more, which means you're going to take curse a lot more. So you may want to consider this of zeal in order to reduce the amount of shadow curse you get, until, again, the developers address that. Whatever their plans are, I couldn't tell you. There is a couple of protection somewhere. I think it's on the cape, for example. Yeah, of protection minus 5% damage taken. If you're interested in just flat out damage reduction, maybe that of protection might be something to interest you as well. Trinkets, and I'm sounding like a broken record at this point. Anything that's going to give you spell damage or spell crit chance, spell crit damage. This pristine focus crystal is next on my list to get. So anything that's going to give you spell stuff. Again, the whole weapon damage right now is pitiful compared to how well spell damage scales. And I know the developers are working on that, but until that happens, you're going to want to prioritize anything with spell damage. Also some vitality, some rejuvenation of health or mana. That way, as a tank, you can stay on your feet, heal others, that kind of thing. The magic shop and orb priority. The Paladin honestly has some wonderful orb upgrades that are just useful across the board. There's a couple that are just really awful. This massive strike I don't find all that useful. It just increases the size of your blessed strike, which I don't care about. However, the purging flames, it just keeps fire on the ground for a brief period of time. It's great for doing a little bit of AoE. It also does fire. So if you happen to find a buff to your fire abilities, then you may want to consider, comboing that with this. So look for fire upgrades, and you'll see the Tavern fire drink shortly, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Wrathful Strike, on the other hand, also does a bit of AoE, but it's more of a lightning thing. So if you're more interested in doing lightning damage, chain lightning, then you may want to consider Wrathful Strike. I like both of these personally. Invigorating Touch, I love this one. It applies a buff to increase health and mana regen for a short period of time. I don't know how effective it really is, but like just that extra buff that I give everyone is fantastic. So I max that out whenever I see it. Turn Undead is also a good one. The Paladin lacks in DPS at times, so having anything that can do a massive AoE to Undead is wonderful. It doesn't do damage to everything because it's only Undead, but it's still something to look at. Elemental Bulwark, fire, ice, and lightning resistance, more tanky, yes, that's beautiful. You gain an additional chance to block 100% of any damage type, 5, 10, 20% chance. That's not bad either. If I can find it, I'll take that, but it's just a chance. You have to just understand that. At 5%, 5 out of 100 hits are going to be blocked, so just think of those odds in the back of your head. I take this when I have no other choice, if all my other options are crappy, but I do prioritize some of the other ones first. This Armor of Wrath, you gain a chance to strike a random nearby enemy with a bolt of lightning. It deals lightning damage. Again, that's okay, but again, it's a chance. 25%, 50%, 75%, but you may want to consider it if you've got the whole Wrathful Strike thing going. That's also lightning. This is lightning damage, so if you're going to buff lightning in some way prior to running by taking a Tavern drink, then those two skills might serve you well. Resolve, it's okay. I typically don't have mana issues because I get trinkets and the like, but something to look at if you're having mana issues, but I personally don't prioritize the Resolve one. Shield of Faith, this is an amazing one. While you have more than half of your maximum mana left, you block damage for a cost of mana. And if you can keep your mana going via regen, then you won't die. You typically won't die. You may not dish out a whole lot of damage, but you won't die. So this is an amazing talent. This is one I would prioritize big time. And then this Zeal, when Conviction triggers, you deal additional physical damage based on your current mana. If there's nothing else available, I'll take that. But ideally, I focus on some of the other ones first. And as far as these other ones, these are spec specific. We'll go over those later. Tavern drinks to consider. Again, I'm not going to touch on the basic ones that we always take anyway. This Impetuous Apprentice isn't bad because the DPS is pretty low on the Paladin. Having your spells cool down faster means you can dish out damage more often. There's just that spell mana cost associated with that. And if you're going for a crit build, or even if you're not, the extra spell crit chance is nice to help really dish out that damage. And again, if you're going to go with a spell crit build via intellect, you're going to want to take this because you'll be dishing out a lot of damage. So again, keep in mind that does come at a cost of spell mana. And then the Gulch Burner for the fire damage, if you're going to take that one ability where you leave that circle of fire on the ground that from the Blessed Strike, I think it is. That might be useful to take, but there's also that lightning one if you're going to go with those two other skills that you could possibly upgrade. I would not prioritize these. These are just options that you may want to consider. I tried Sudden Death out because I do have an active heal, and I was not bad. Plus 50% spell damage, but you lose 50% of the mana cost as health when casting spells. So every time I cast something, I lose health, but I heal it right back typically. And with Impetuous Apprentice, I can cast my heal more quickly. So you're going to have to play around with that. Some people may not have the attributes or the trinkets to do that yet, but it is something to consider down the line when you know that your mana is well under control. Weapon Mastery, again, with the whole weapon damage being not as good, you may want to look at maces or swords. I don't know. It's whatever main that you use. Personally, I have not touched this with the Paladin. I've been focused more on spell damage and spell crit than actual weapon damage. But again, that may change down the line, in which case you may want to take whatever primary weapon you're using. So just find it from the list here and pick it. I would recommend trinkets first, though, unless they actually tune weapon damage to be super powerful. I guess we'll see when that happens. Let's talk about basic abilities for the Paladin. We'll talk about specializations later. Blessed Strike. Max this out. It's great. You strike all enemies in the area in front of you, dealing physical damage. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it's one of the primary damage dealers that the Paladin has. You're going to be spamming this. It can be upgraded to that whole Ring of Fire thing via the Orb upgrade, and that does fire damage on top of it. So Blessed Strike, you definitely want to upgrade that. Lay on Hands, again, you're the only class that can actively heal. It's the only class with an active heal ability, so why not be the support you were meant to be and max this out too? Armored Knight, yes, this is a tank thing. If you're going to tank and take damage, this is what you're designed to do. Armor, yes. Armor percentage, just everything, just yes, take it. A chance to block 100% physical damage, yes. So yeah, max this out. Conviction, this is what I was talking about earlier with that whole melee requirement. Conviction is your melee weapon hits have a chance to restore some of your mana. Super important because, again, there are certain orb upgrades and skills that, like, for example, is it the Shield of Faith or something, where if you take a hit, it takes from your mana and not from your health. So you need a regular supply of mana to stay alive. So, yes, max out Conviction as well. And like I said, these other ones are specialization stuff. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, I have a feeling that the next part is going to piss some people off because, well, honestly, all three of these I don't find to be excellent DPS specs. Just there are other classes that out DPS the Paladin. It just puts it to shame. So I'll tell you which one I like the best and why. So first of all, let's go to Radiance. I tried Radiance out and it's fun. It has that Inner Flames ability where you gain stack of it and you're dealing fire damage to everything. Immolation, fire damage. All of that is wonderful until you come up across enemies that are fire resistant. So your one trick pony now is, well, yeah, you're going to be a slight disadvantage. Let's just say that. And what I don't like about Immolation is that typically you charge that up. Okay? And that can be awkward when you're in the middle of a fight or surrounded by enemies and if you're one of us old people that have a hard time focusing on two things at a time or, trying to hold in the Q button or whatever it is while you're moving and more button presses and more things to think about. I sometimes I just hit Immolation rather than charge it because I'm rushed or feeling rushed. It's just not for me. Yes, it can do damage, but I don't prefer it. So Radiance, it might be something to consider if you're going to do, it's up to you. I think these specs are going to be user specific as to what they prefer to play, honestly. Immolation wasn't bad, I'll say that. But again, around fire resistant enemies, it was a little rough. And trying to get my Immolation, I had to get in the middle of everything to really make it effective, and it put me at risk. And it wasn't great. So Radiance is okay. Justice, again, just okay. With Judgment, it throws that hammer down the nearby enemies, but you have to be nearby, relatively nearby, and it hits random enemies. So, again, you kind of have to put yourself at risk whenever you're using this. And the Lawbringer is nice because it does disarm and silence attackers. But typically, though, you don't want to take any damage as a paladin. You want to try to avoid it, even if you're buffed, because some things can inflict curse on you. So typically, you don't want to take a hit anyway. But that being said, I don't like how close you have to be for this to work. And if you punch this ability, and there's only a couple of enemies nearby, the rest of the hammers go to waste. They don't drop, and then the cooldown goes away, and that's it. So I didn't like Justice as much either. It is nice when you're surrounded by enemies and have no choice. At least it'll help from a crowd control standpoint, disarm and silence attackers. That's a good one, but there's only a chance of that happening, max 30%. The one I like the most out of all of them is Divine. And the reason for that is your Divine Pillars, they explode in different directions and can be upgraded to explode even more in different directions. So even though it's still a short radius around the Paladin, it's still a fairly large one. It's fairly large. It's still a close ranged ability, but it's got a nice area of effect, and it can be upgraded. So I like Divine Pillars the most. It can also inflict blindness, 30% chance to miss attacks for 5 seconds. And then Divine Protection, I think, is going to be a lifesaver for some people that still have issues surviving as a Paladin. Taking damage when below half health has a chance to grant you a buff of invulnerability for a brief period. This effect has a cooldown. Chance 25%. Duration 3.5 seconds, cooldown 14 seconds, as what I have it on now. But you can reduce that even further to 12 seconds. So this Divine will keep you alive. I find that Divine Pillars does a decent amount of damage, and that Divine Protection, really kicks in when I need it. And you can even upgrade this Divine Protection to increase like health regen and the like so that you're not dying. So out of all of them, I think Divine is going to give you the most survivability out of all of them, and that's what I prefer to run. What you prefer, you're going to have to try out all three and make your own decisions. And there you have it, a quick look at the Paladin class. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion, not the meta. Okay? If you guys want to see more videos, subscribe, like, share, all that jazz. This is the last class video in the series, so unless they make another class, that would be cool. Fingers crossed for the priest, right? So I'm open to ideas as to what video to make next, so feel free to leave a comment in the below. This is Vince. Thanks for watching. Catch y'all next time. Take care.